Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies in their diapers, welcome to the Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy.
That's me, Tiberius.
And welcome to the Tiberius Show today. And I'm your host, Tiberius Boy. And as always, we're looking at various jobs and how they affect the world around us. Today's is going to be very interesting. We're going to talk to a system and software engineer. Do you have any idea what a software engineer does? Well, neither do I, but let's find out. Let me introduce our next guest, the one, the only, the amazing Adeena Mignogna.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, and thank you for being on the show.
Happy to be here.
Okay, so you are listed as a system and software engineer. Can you explain to my listeners exactly what do you do?
Yes. So those are two separate things, but they can be combined. And some days or some projects I've been a software engineer versus other projects where I've been a systems engineer, where sometimes they do overlap. And a software engineer means I'm working on or in some way responsible for developing software similar to, we're using software to record this podcast. You have all kinds of software on your phones, on your computers, on your video games. But the software that I work on and develop happens to control satellites. And systems engineering is a very broad discipline, and it's related to how any system, and a system could be a car, could be a phone, it could be a computer, it could be a satellite, how a system works and comes together, because a system is usually a bunch of pieces or subsystems that all get put together. And to make a complicated or complex project all come together, there's a lot of aspects of that systems engineering that we get into to make the whole project work. And software and systems come together because a software program, an application like think of your favorite video game, or think of the software we're using to record this, is really made up of a bunch of pieces that come together to make the whole application work. And so when you think of your software like that, it becomes systems.
So it's kind of like organs with like cells, which turns into tissues, which turns into organ systems.
Yep, that's one way to break it down. There is hierarchy. If you think of a car, you can break down a car into the chassis or the part where the people are. And then you've got the engine and the transmission and all the different pieces down to the wheels and the brakes and the seats.
Huh. Okay. So what sparked your interest in working in STEM?
It's hard to nail it down to one thing. I've always had an interest back to when I was young. I think some of my earliest memories were watching science fiction, especially Star Wars, and getting very interested in the robots of Star Wars. And, my dad was an engineer. So I guess I grew up around the mindset of math and engineering and technology. So it was just always there, and I always had the interest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the real important question really is, what do you like better, Star Trek or Star Wars?
So the nice thing is they're so different. I don't have to say I like one better or worse. The way I usually describe it is that I have a degree in Star Trek, I have a degree in Star Trek and a minor in Star Wars. But really, Star Wars started it first for me with the robots. I got interested in Star Trek a little later on with space exploration. But they are so different. You can love them both for different reasons and in different ways. And I do. I love them both.
Now, did you just wake up and decide you could do this, or did you work under someone first?
Oh, gosh. Well, I would say throughout my junior high school, middle school, and high school years, I knew I wanted to work in the space industry. And so a lot of it was figuring out, well, how do you make that happen? There's so many like aspects to the industry, so many things you could do. So, what do I study in college? Where do I go to college? What do I do once I get there? How do you make this happen? And yeah, so it started with, I went to the University of Maryland for college and I studied physics while I was there, which is not typical for someone who knows they want to actually do engineering. And that's a whole story of why I went into physics. But while I was earning my degree, I was able to get a job working on a piece of hardware that wound up launching into space on a satellite in 1997 and is still operating today.
Huh. Do you work on teams with other engineers?
Yes. Really, engineering is a very collaborative work. It's especially since these are very complex projects. You really can't do you can't do it all by yourself. So it's other engineers, but then other people too, because a project involves thinking about how much money we're spending on the project. So budget. So there are finance people. Usually there's customers involved. So there's contracts people. So it's even, and then there's even other aspects, like one we call supply chain. Because if we're building a satellite, the pieces that we buy need to come from someplace. So we have a whole team of people involved in what we call supply chain. They buy the components that we use to put together and build our stuff. So there's a whole lot of people involved.
Huh. Okay. So how does working as a system and software engineer help the world be a better place?
Well, I think it all is a matter of what kinds of projects you're working on. So the discipline itself of software engineering or systems in and of itself may or may not, but a lot of the satellite missions that I've worked on in the past and hope to work on in the future relate to, so the one I mentioned that launched in 1997, it's studying the sun and space weather, which is very important for us to understand, especially because space weather affects our atmosphere. It affects what's our other satellites in orbit, and it can even affect stuff here on the ground. So there's a lot of space work that relates to understanding our planet and our weather. And then there's a lot of technology that happens that we develop for space that gets used on the ground too. So I think all of that combined and understanding our planet is what's helping to make things better.
Okay, so how does software engineering play a role in NASA's missions, and what kind of programs or applications did you work on?
Okay. So let me, I guess, say this first a little bit. So NASA is often what a lot of people think of when they think of space, but there's other organizations and not always even government organizations. There are commercial companies out there too. And there's other countries that have a space organization like the European Space Agency, ESA. So, but now all of these do have software engineering aspects because in a satellite, like any other device, there's software in it. But then we control satellites from the ground. And so there's a whole, software that, controls the spacecraft. Sometimes people, when they think of NASA, they think of a big control room and people are sitting in front of their computers and consoles.
Oh, yeah.
So the software that they're using on those computers, that's the kind of software that I've worked on and several of my colleagues have worked on.
Okay.
We call it command and control software is usually the term for it.
So what's the best part about being a system and software engineer?
That's a good question. A lot of it really comes down to, the missions and the people I've been able to work with, which of course aren't necessarily related to software systems per se. It's just an artifact of I work with some really smart people. I work with people who have similar interests to me with space. So that's kind of fun when you come together with a team of people who all care about the same mission.
Okay.
So, a lot of it comes down to people.
So what programming languages do you use in your work? And are there any you would recommend for kids interested in software engineering?
Oh, definitely. So first of all, so I've been doing this for a couple of decades, if you can believe that. And I started out using programming languages called C and Fortran, which still are in use and still exist. And then I spent a long time working with C++. But in recent years, and I've used other languages like Java, but in recent years, I've used a lot of Python, and that is absolutely a language I'd recommend that anyone, kid or adult, who wants to start learning how to program, everyone can start learning Python. And it is a simple matter of, Googling, learn Python. And there's so many resources out there on the internet to do so. But Python is a great starting point.
Okay. So what is one thing you think kids should know about being a software engineer?
So software is everywhere. And so
Yeah.
it's not just software engineering for the sake of software. It's, well, what other interests do you have? Like, so I'm interested in space, so I'm doing software related to space. Are you interested in medical stuff? Well, there's software related to
A little
medical
bit.
stuff,
Yeah.
right? Are you interested in, let's say, well, a car? There's software in your
Well,
car.
yeah. Especially
So what are you
Teslas
interested in?
nowadays.
Well, but even a standard non-electric
Yeah,
vehicle,
that's
there's a
true.
lot of software involved in controlling and running your car.
Yeah.
So what are you interested in?
Video games mainly, but I know a lot about coding and video games and software in there.
Well, again, that's obvious, an obvious software
Yeah.
one. But anything that you're doing on your computer,
Oh yeah,
you know,
like
there's
automatic
software.
calculators. Like you put
Yeah.
a problem in
Yep.
and it figures it out, like a calculator. Yeah.
Yep. But even things like your word processor, that is a very advanced piece of software. Again, the software we're using to record this, so whatever you're interested in, there's probably going to be some aspect of software related to it too.
Okay. Well, now here seems like a good time to take a quick commercial break. Let's hear a word from our sponsors.
The Tiberius Show would like to thank one of their dedicated sponsors, Custom Designs Orlando. These guys are on Mills Avenue and do all sorts of stuff, ranging from photo ID badges, engraved signs, custom braille ADA signs, vinyl lettering to trophies and awards. The cool part about Custom Designs is they can ship products all over the United States. You can reach them at 407-898-0373 and tell them that
Tiberius
sent you.
And we are back here talking with Adeena Mignogna. Adeena is a software engineer and works for NASA.
Not exactly for NASA, but I work on missions for NASA.
So you basically work with NASA, right?
Work with them. Yeah. So what NASA does is, well, they do so many things, but one of the things they do is they hire outside companies like mine to build a lot of the spacecraft or parts of the spacecraft or something. So
That makes sense.
the company I work for, which is called Northrop Grumman, we built the James Webb Space Telescope. So we built the body, the spacecraft part of the telescope.
I see.
We build and have a vehicle called Cygnus. And what Cygnus does is it brings supplies to the International Space Station every few months. In fact, we just had one that debirthed, we call it debirthed or detached from the space station just before Christmas time. So those are the kinds of things that NASA hires companies like mine to do. And I've worked on those kinds of projects.
Yeah. Okay, so now you know software engineering is about writing the software, but do you ever design or work on the hardware as well?
Years ago, I worked on some hardware. In fact, that job I mentioned while I was earning my degree in college, I designed hardware pieces that got built up into this instrument that we launched. And then I also was involved in some of the assembly and testing of it too. So I have done over the years some hardware. It's been a while. But
Okay. Now, I did some research and found that you have a podcast that you worked on called the Big Sci-Fi Podcast. Well, what do you even talk about in the podcast?
Science fiction, all kinds of science fiction.
Okay, so how'd you come up with the idea of talking about science fiction?
Well, my co-host, so I'm one of 4 co-hosts. It's myself, Brian, Chris, and Steve. And we met because we all were writing some articles for a Star Trek based fan website. And so we met through that and kind of decided we wanted to do this, and it just happened.
I see.
And we talk about a lot of Star Trek, but Star Wars, we talk about science fiction novels, we talk about other movies, we sometimes have guests on. If it's science fiction, we're probably talking about it.
Okay. So, where can my listeners find your podcast to listen to it?
Gosh, we are on all the major podcast platforms. You can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple, etc. Just search for the Big Sci-Fi Podcast.
Which it's the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, all the biggest capital, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Although in the search algorithm, I don't think that matters, but when you see it all capitalized, you know you found the right one.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So what's the most misunderstood part about your business as an engineer?
I think probably the amount of math people expect that we do. There certainly is a lot of math in engineering, but not all engineering, and it isn't all math, particularly when we talk about systems engineering.
Okay. Now see, I'm told now that men and women are equal, but in the past, women had a harder time in the science field. Did you have to overcome many obstacles?
Not really. But it was when I entered the field, it was kind of with the, I guess, understanding. I don't know if understanding is the best word, but I knew I was going into something where I would often be the only female in the room. And for a long time, for most of the early part of my career, I was. And I am crazy fortunate that the people that I worked with, which were at the, pretty much mostly men, did not treat me differently. So I didn't have a lot of problems. However, I have several friends who are women who are the same age as me and took a slightly different path, and they had all kinds of obstacles. And a lot of it being where they were outright told by other men they worked with that they didn't belong there.
Wow.
And I give them so much credit for being able to persevere and stay.
Yeah.
Even in that phase. So I didn't have to deal with any of that personally. And these days it's a lot different. I am now rarely the only female in the room, especially technical female in the room. I work with a lot of female engineers. Most of them are younger than me. There's only a handful that I've interacted with that are my age or older, but it is very different. And I just somehow got very lucky with my specific experiences.
Okay. So do you have any particular advice for girls that want to get into STEM related industries?
Well, if you want to do it, just do it. Find what excites you about it, and dive in. There's, so much to learn. And again, with the internet today, so fortunate to any idea you have or interest you have, you can just get on there and start exploring and learning in a way that was not possible when I was young. I was stuck with, did my dad know anything, or was there a book on the library? And oftentimes libraries, while I love libraries, they are wonderful, they don't always have everything you might want. Now, again, most libraries now are then connected also to the internet, which expands their reach and ability. But
true.
Back in the early 80s, it was there or it wasn't.
Well, I've asked you about NASA a lot, but why aerospace and why learn about space?
Well, so for me, I don't know how or why it kicked in. And the thing is, I do have a lot of other interests too. I joke sometimes, or I used to joke, that if the space industry or aerospace didn't exist, I might have gone into marine science. There are a lot of other things I'm interested in. Yeah. But, somehow and I think I do have to credit Star Trek with really wanting to explore and learn more about our universe, our galaxy. Can we go live on Mars? Okay. What planets are out there, around other stars, and could we live there someday? And, what do we still not know about the universe? So all those kinds of things make it, to me, very fascinating.
Okay. Well, what's the craziest thing that has happened while you were doing your passion?
Gosh. Crazy is a... I would say it's just... I'm going to go back to that mission that I worked on that launched in 1997, and that is still out there. It's not really crazy. except for if you think about how far away that mission went, it's something like 500,000 kilometers away from Earth.
Ooh,
I
wow.
touched hardware and helped assemble and test an instrument and design this that launched and is now 500,000 kilometers away from Earth. Not many people can say that. And so
Wow.
to me, that's like a little like, whoa, like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if it fits your definition of crazy, but yeah,
Well,
that's what I got.
Okay, what's the hardest part about working as a system and software engineer?
The fact that a lot of what we do, while it's great that we work in teams, and a lot of people, sometimes that can itself is very challenging to make sure that everybody is working to the same goal in the same way. We are very constrained with schedules and budgets. We can't just spend any money. We can't,
Yeah.
just have all the time in the
We
world.
don't have infinite
So-
money.
Right. So being able to work with a team and lead a team to get the job done, I mean, that really is the hardest part of all of this.
That makes sense. So, who can you say was the person that helped drive your passion the most?
Probably my dad, and just in the fact that he was just always encouraging, and not in a overt like way, but just the fact that I knew, I guess the best way to say it is I knew he had my back. It was obvious, like I said, from a young age that I was going to do something sciencey, something engineering-y, and he was always there knowing I could do it.
Okay. So, can you share some advice for someone wanting to become a system software engineer?
Well, it makes a difference, not necessarily where you go to college, but, this is one of those cases where a college degree is going to be necessary because the jobs in the workforce do require at least a bachelor's degree. But it doesn't necessarily matter, what part of engineering you really study. To be a lot of my fellow software engineers. So, I didn't study computer science. I studied physics, and then also had that overlay of learning computer science and learning software. And a lot of my coworkers are similar. I have coworkers who have a degree in electrical engineering, but do software. I have coworkers who have a degree in math, but do software. So a lot of times it's find what is your core passion and then overlay things like software on it, because software is everywhere.
Yeah. So, what's the best advice that you've ever received?
I have received so much. I'm old, which means I've received a lot of awesome advice. I think some of the best, it was not direct, it was indirect advice. It was years and years ago when I was very burned out, actually. I was working too much and I got burned out. And I worked with someone who helped teach me some time management skills. And so I'm going to count that, because learning those skills in that form has helped me immensely with my day job and work, with writing, with everything.
Okay. Well, what message do you want to tell children all over the world about doing the work that you do?
It's fun. You get to continuously learn, which is actually some of the most fun parts about it. Go, look at some pictures of space, look at the International Space Station, and then you just see how cool it is. And there you go. Pictures, that whole, pictures is 1,000 words, or video is 1,000 pictures, stuff like that. Just go look up International Space Station on YouTube as a great start. And then you'll see what I mean.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's take a quick break to pay some bills. And we are back here with Adeena Mignogna, system and software engineer. So, I found out that you made sci-fi series about robots. What inspired you to write those books?
Okay, yes, you were talking about my Robot Galaxy series, beginning with the first book is Crazy Foolish Robots. Oh, wow. That book, it was something else entirely when I started it. It was actually going to be called How to Be a Rocket Scientist, and meant to be kind of silly. But then it took on a life of its own, as sometimes writing projects do, and became Crazy Foolish Robots.
Okay.
I know that didn't really answer the question, because what inspired me, just, I'm around science and science fiction all the
Yeah,
time, so
that
I've
makes
always had
sense.
this interest in writing it, and so ideas just they're
Popped
just
into
there. I
your
have a lot of
head.
ideas. Yes.
Okay, so what is like the age level of your books? Like, is it safe for like kids younger than me or older than me, or my
Well,
age?
it's written for adults, but it is safe for kids. There's
Mm.
nothing in there that kids can't see. In fact, my older son, when he was 11 years old, is when the first book came out, and he read it, and as did several of his friends. So it's
Mm.
safe for kids, but I use a vocabulary that you might find on your SAT someday, like
Oh
the word
gosh.
ubiquitous. So I use words for, it's meant for adults, but it's safe.
Okay. So how do you take time to write while working as a system and software engineer?
Well, so remember that whole time management skills I mentioned a few
Oh
minutes ago. A
yeah.
lot of it is that. And I specifically have time in my schedule where I block out, which is my writing time, which for me works out to be from 5 to 6 a.m. every morning. So,
Wow, you get up
yep,
early.
yep. Oh yeah, yes, I'm an early bird these days. And so yeah, so the first thing I do, 5 to 6, before anyone else in the house wakes up, before my kids get up, I'm writing.
Wow. Whoa. I
That is the
can't.
reaction I
I,
usually get. Yes.
I can't imagine that. Cause
You're
okay,
probably
next
sleeping in.
question. What's the one thing that happened in your career that you did not expect?
Well, let's see. Different times and different expectations. There was one time when I decided to quit aerospace altogether.
What?
And if you had told me, yeah, let's see, the year was 2002, and I got
Wow.
burned out. And so I left. And if you had told me at any time before then that I would do something like that, I would have said there's no way. So, yeah, so at some point it was unexpected until then I started planning it and I left. And I opened up a retail store.
Wow. What was it called?
It was called the Pot and Bead. It was a paint your own pottery and bead your own
Mm,
jewelry. It was like an art store. And I had that for a
okay.
few years. And I took some time to, I would say, decompress. And then a couple years later, went back to realize that I really belonged back in
Yeah.
aerospace. So I went back.
Okay. So what have you learned about yourself that you wish that you knew earlier?
Well, it took the fact that I can write full novels is a big thing. I spent a lot of time in my 20s and early 30s thinking that I couldn't do it, thinking that I could only write short stories. And, so that I would say that was a big thing. I kind of wish I had never told myself I couldn't do something. Um, so things like that. Sometimes we tell ourselves we can't do some things, and that's really not ever
Mm,
true.
okay. Well, if you could go back in time and give your 12-year-old self advice, what would it be?
So my 12-year-old self, I would tell my 12-year-old self to probably read more, even though I read. I wish I had read more when I was younger.
Hmm.
Write more, even though I did a little writing, even just like journally kind of writing. I just wish I had done.
Okay.
And not put so much pressure on myself when it came to school.
Mm. Okay. What was the biggest mistake that you've ever made, and how did it change you as a person?
Let's see. My biggest mistakes were probably relate to finances. So something you might not have to worry about
Mm.
yet. But
Oh
when
no, I have to worry
I
about it.
okay, when I became an adult, I got a credit card, and that
Mm.
was a mistake because I used
Really?
it. hmm
Oh.
I didn't need it, and I was using it when I didn't really need it, and I was able to
Mm.
tell myself I did need the things that I didn't really need, and that was a big mistake, and I think set me off early on on a not great path financially. Luckily, I figured it out, and I overcame that, and everything got better. But it
Mm.
was a hard couple years.
Okay. So when you're not working, what do you do for fun?
Let's see. Besides writing, because I do find writing,
Oh
even though
yeah.
it is like a second job, it's also really fun. I do it because it's fun. If I didn't like doing it, I wouldn't. But then beyond that, I love playing with my kids. We play a lot of games together. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, are there any specific games or apps that you've used or created that you think your kids would enjoy?
Oh gosh, well we have like whole bookshelves of board games and other kinds of like tabletop games. Like and my favorites are ones that are puzzle games or that have kind of like a visual puzzle aspect to it.
Okay.
Um, like there's one I love called Blocus, which everyone gets these different shaped pieces and you take turns putting one on the board and you have to get all yours on the board and block other people
Block us?
and
Is that what it is?
Bloc Blockus or Blocus, yes. I don't know how it's actually
I know
pronounced.
that game. That's a
I
fun
love that
game.
game.
Yeah, that's a great game.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I
so
like those kinds of things are the things that I really like
yeah,
to play.
okay. Yeah, that's a good one to teach your kids. So, do you play
Yeah.
video games? And if you do, what is your favorite one?
So I used to play a lot more when I was a little bit younger, but I'll tell you one that and again it's kind of because it's kind of sad that a couple of these games didn't exist when I was young. I would have completely been into Minecraft when I was young.
Ah.
Both my kids are into it. I would have definitely have been, but I feel like I'm a little. I don't want to say too old, but I just got too many other things going on to get into it. But I'll play these days. I like playing Mario Kart with my
Mario
kids.
Kart's fun.
Yeah, and I've always
Yeah.
enjoyed racing games. So Mario Kart's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite book to read?
Gosh. Oh, well, the book that I will reread is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Do you know that one?
No,
Oh gosh,
I don't.
it's so much fun, and it was made into a movie, which was not as great as the book. But Douglas Adams wrote this. If you ever hear people making fun, not making fun of, but like admiring the number 42, and you know that 42 is a special significance. It came from that book, and there are a lot of other pop culture
Okay.
references that came from that book. It's a
Okay.
great fun book.
Okay. Can you tell me that one story? You don't remember. This is a kid's show. But that one story, well, that you're not supposed to tell me about. Come on. You can tell me.
Well, I'm probably not supposed to tell you that
But you can
when I
tell me.
was a student, I wasn't a good student. I was terrible.
Huh?
So most people, when they think of aerospace and they think of aerospace engineers, they assume that
Smart.
all of us were straight A students. Well, you can be smart
Yeah. Well,
and be a bad
yeah.
student. And that's exactly the problem is what happens. And when I said a few minutes ago about not putting pressure on myself was because I was in honors classes and AP classes, but I might have had the lowest grades in those classes. And that's hard. That's really hard to deal with. Because everyone around you, your parents, your teachers, yourself, are telling you should be doing better, and for whatever reason, you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the things that I would tell you, tell others, tell myself when I was that age is, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You can still do what you want to do, even if your grades are not perfect. That's not going to be the end of the world. And there are reasons. Some people can do really well in a classroom setting. Some people like me don't know how to do well in it, and we don't figure it out till we're 40 years old.
Okay.
So when I was 40 years old, I went back to get a master's degree, and that's when I had figured it out and knew how to be a good student then.
Okay. Is there anything else you think my listeners should know about you and what you do?
Oh gosh, I think we covered so much already.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well, do you have a Facebook or website for my listeners and what to follow you?
I do. My website is Adeena M. So my first name, ADEENAM.com. And from there you can find everything. But yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on all the different apps. I'm most active on Facebook and also LinkedIn. I post a
Okay.
lot of stuff about career and writing on LinkedIn. Actually, is one of my favorite platforms. But I'm everywhere.
Okay. Now, I believe the last name spelled for Facebook is
Mhm.
Mignogna.
No, you almost. Oh,
Was I
you're so
close?
close. So close. You're
The
very
second
close.
G isn't there, is it?
No, there are two G's. Actually, a lot of people leave off, but yes, Mignogna.
Oh, I added another G. Oh, I see. Okay. Let's try doing it from memory. Okay, so what is that one question that you think I forgot to ask you about?
I think you didn't ask me what I'm writing next.
Well, what are you writing next?
Well, since my book Lunar Logic came out, I returned to the Robot Galaxy universe. So the 4 books I have out, Crazy Foolish Robots and the 3 others. And while at first I thought I was done with all those, I wanted to continue in that universe. So I'm actively working on another set, not a series, but a set of 4 books that take place simultaneously after the first 4. And so those will start getting released late in the year.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Adeena, for being my special guest. Can you stick around for Math Corners?
Absolutely.
Over 40 years, Lighthouse Central Florida has provided education, independent life skills, and job training to thousands of Central Floridians who live with blindness or any degree of vision loss. Whether it's picking out clothes in the morning or just moving around your community and serving Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties. Contact Lighthouse Central Florida at 407-898-2483 or visit them online at lighthousecfl.org.
Tiberius' favorite subject, it's Math Corners!
And thank you so much, Adeena, for helping me with Math Corners. This week, we are going to do some more multi-step word problems, and my dad is always good at finding new problems for me to solve. Today, we're going to talk about a party. Okay. So, Emma's planning a birthday party for her friend. She has $150 to spend. She decides to buy decorations, snacks, and a gift. 1. Emma spends $45 on decorations. 2. The snacks cost twice as much as the decorations. And 3. The gift she wants to buy costs $30. How much money will Emma have left after buying the decorations, snacks, and the gifts for the birthday party?
Do you want me to answer right now?
Nah, it's fine.
Or is this for you to work out an answer?
It's for me. Well, first is a real world problem because, well, my parents dragged me to the store to buy gifts and decorations for any party. But first off, Emma has only $150 to use for all the party expenses. She first spends $45 on decorations to make the party festive. For snacks, Emma decides to spend twice as much as she did on decorations. So if decorations cost $45, the snacks will cost $45 times 2, which is 10 carry 1 plus 8 is 90. So next, Emma plans to buy a gift for her friend, and she finds one which costs $30. So the total cost is 45 plus 90 plus 30 is 165. And you add the dollar signs with $165. But if Emma started with 150 and she spent 165, if you find out how much money she has left, she has negative $15. Let's hope she has some extra money in her wallet. So, Adeena, do you have to figure out your budget and how much you have to spend for parties?
Well, yes and no. We don't do a lot of parties, but yes, budgets are absolutely a part of life and living and work. What I do as an engineer. So yes, budgets are all over the place and very important.
Sure. Well, my teacher said that I would use math every day. And how do you use math with your work?
Yeah, well, your math teacher is right, but even not just work, in life, you're going to be using math every day. And math isn't just, these kinds of rote calculations. Math is everything to do with numbers and quantities and patterns and all these things. If you imagine a world where the digits that we're used to, like 0, 1, 2, 3 through 9, imagine they didn't exist. How would you find your house?
That's
numbers are everywhere and we use them in so many different forms. So it is truly, we don't think about a lot of the day-to-day stuff because it's just so ingrained into what we know and what we do. But there was a day several hundred years ago where they didn't use the numbers we use today.
Oh, yeah.
So it's everywhere. Now,
like colors
at work,
or even numbers, like nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So at work, right now I am doing a lot of budgeting. So the numbers come up there. But when we're talking about satellites and space missions, every aspect of that involves math and numbers in some way, from if we're planning out our orbits and trajectories. So how we describe how a satellite goes around the Earth, that's all math. Or it's physics, and we use math to describe that motion. When we're building something,
if you have a degree in physics and math, you might become a hardware engineer or software engineer.
well, most people who do hardware have more of a mechanical engineering background, but there's a lot of math and physics kind of overlap in all these different fields. But there is also, so if you think about mechanical engineering and you think about actually designing the hardware, so when you're looking at the size of something, okay, that's all described by math. Is it, a meter long? Is it a meter and a half long? And what does that mean for the other dimensions? And our spacecraft have fluids in it. And so you have to, there's numbers involved in accounting for the fluids. There's numbers involved in bookkeeping the mass, how heavy or how massive is your spacecraft. So all these things involve, numbers, sometimes more complex, sometimes more straightforward and just like a budget. And actually we use the term mass budget to keep track of, how heavy our spacecraft is. So yeah, it's everywhere.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Adeena, for your help with Math Corners.
Sure.
And now it's time for the Heart of a Lion. As you know, we talk about the qualities of living, but the Heart of a Lion, which stands for leadership, integrity, obedience, and nobility. This week, we are going to talk about integrity. For me, I think integrity is doing what is right, even when no one else is looking. The qualities of integrity is honesty, sincerity, truthfulness, and fairness. This week at school, in 7th grade at the Christ School, there was a kid named Alex who was known for being honest and doing the right thing. One day, before a surprise quiz, Alex found a cheat sheet on the floor. Instead of using it, he decided to tell the teacher, Mrs. Hoyer. He showed her the cheat sheet and said that he found it. Mrs. Hoyer was really happy that Alex was so honest. She thanked him, and the story spread around the school. Everyone thought Alex was a hero for doing the right thing. Even the principal, Mr. Rinks, heard about it. He decided to talk about Alex in front of the whole school during assembly. Alex got a big round of applause. From then on, Alex became a role model for honesty at the Christ School. His story showed everyone that being honest is important, and sometimes that you can be a hero just by doing the right thing. So, Adeena, did you see or use integrity at all this week?
Not to that level. I feel like examples like that are rare. Integrity is one of the values that we go by at my day job at work too. So I think it's so ingrained that I might not notice that we're doing it.
Okay. Well, of all of the Heart of a Lion virtues, which is the one that you see the most?
Probably leadership, and that might happen to be because of the role that I play on my teams, which usually I am in a fairly leadership position, and I also mentor some of my younger colleagues in that area as well. So I think that one.
We should always try to be lion strong in everything we do, shouldn't we?
Sure. Yes.
And that's our show, folks. I want to thank the one, the only, the amazing Adeena Mignogna for being on my show. It has been so much fun talking to you today. I think we learned a lot about your career as a system and software engineer at NASA. Well, working with NASA. And we learned about your cool books as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Do you mind giving your social media and website again?
Sure. The website is AdeenaM, ADEENAM.com, and you can find all my socials from there. But also at Adeena is where I am a lot of places.
Okay. Also, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Tiberius Show. And I would like to thank WWPR 1490 AM, KI1998, Soul Radio 24/7, EasyWay TV, and all the other stations that air on my show. Please be sure to visit The Tiberius Show on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Adeena, are you subscribed yet?
I am hitting the button right now.
Yes. Oh, and be sure to leave a comment if you want to work for NASA. or with NASA. I answer all the comments myself, and also be sure to listen next week on the Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy.